Phoenix, where anarchists pack heat and send Nazis packing. In 2009, I traveled to Arizona to write about demonstrations between anarchists and the neo-Nazi group the National Socialist Movement. Finding myself in unfamiliar territory where libertarians and constitutionalists on the right outnumbered progressives and liberals, and where black bloc militants proudly openly carried firearms to demonstrations, I decided to not only cover the raucous protests, but also take on the fascists politically. For more information and background on the day's events, check out the Phoenix Class War Council blog at firesneverextinguished.blogspot.com. I won't lie, as I looked out through my appropriated Aviator Forever 21 sunglasses, I felt a little uneasy. That's a big group, I thought, as a motley crew of mostly large men carrying American and swastika flags began to goose-step my way. On closer inspection, I realized that the large group that looked to be about 100 was in fact mostly police. This, of course, didn't make me feel any less afraid. So here I was, on the front line, prepared to throw down against the National Socialist Movement, a political party that wants a fascist, all-white America. The NSM has attempted to take over from where George Lincoln Rockwell's American Nazi Party left off in the 1960s, attempting to be the force within the white nationalist movement, which continues to splinter, fracture, and die. I came to Phoenix hoping that the $180 Greyhound bus ticket and the 18-hour ride, all while sitting next to a bathroom door that continued to open and smelled the entire place up with rotten piss, would be worth it. It was, and the success of the confrontational and militant actions that took place demonstrates several things that anarchists everywhere could learn from. Inglorious bastards. Several weeks ago, a flyer started circulating on the internet produced by the Phoenix Class War Council that encouraged people to confront the NSM at their scheduled rally on November 7th, 2009 at the Arizona State Capitol in Phoenix. The flyer included an image from a popular new movie, Inglorious Bastards, in which an elite group of American Jewish servicemen in World War II tracked down and brutally killed Nazis in Europe. The looming showdown of anarchists and Nazis created quite a large buzz on the internet, getting coverage on several news sites, including the major alternative Phoenix newspaper, New Times, as well as some of the major libertarian websites. The call to confront the NSM was followed by a well-written piece entitled "The NSM Offers Nothing for the Working Class But More Exploitation and Misery." It argued an anarchist critique of the NSM and white supremacy, which was presented as a cross-class alliance between working-class whites and white elites that breaks up the unity of the working class, hindering possible united action. The media and the internet was abuzz, and the fascists were stating in the press that they would bring out 200 people for their America First rally, highlighting their opposition to illegal immigration. The stage was set for a showdown. Desert of the real. Phoenix is a city divided by race politics and immigration issues. Unlike other major cities on the West Coast, Phoenix has both a left and a strong libertarian and constitutionalist scene, which holds sizable influence. Struggles against speed cameras, for instance, which ticket people for driving over the speed limit, have been headed largely by libertarian-type groups. This context makes organizing in Phoenix for anarchists quite different than many places in California. Probably the man that everyone has the biggest bone to pick with in town is Sheriff Joe Arpaio, who has served as sheriff in 1993. People fucking hate this guy. You see it on t-shirts, in newspapers, and in the streets. Sheriff Joe has gained so much scorn because of his tough-on-immigrants stance and his harsh management of prisoners. Under Federal Law 287G, which gives Sheriff Joe and his deputies the ability to deport people, raids in the area have broken up families and displaced working-class peoples from their means of existence and their loved ones. And while Sheriff Joe has been going after immigrants, Phoenix in the last few years has become the playground of groups like the Minutemen, who guard the border against immigrants with guns. One of the figures to emerge from this movement, also known to hobnob with Sheriff Joe and State Senator Russell Pierce, is former Maricopa County Republican Precinct Committeeman J.T. Reddy, who also just happens to be a supporter of the National Socialist Movement. JT first started getting heat for his hours of fascist activity when photos of him at a National Socialist Movement rally surfaced in 2007. Reddy started handing out anti-Semitic and racist texts at his office. Reddy's Republican bosses buckled after the embarrassment hit the papers, and he was fired, but he continued to be a fixture in the local political landscape. In the days leading up to the NSM demo, Reddy appeared on several television stations, claiming that while he was not a member of the NSM, which is interesting because his license plate reads NSM USA, he supports the NSM because it is a white civil rights organization. While JT Reddy has been pushed out of most nativist movements, the Phoenix far-right welcomes him with open arms, and he even spoke at a Tea Party rally on July 4th. The ability of very vocal neo-Nazis to exist within Arizona anti-immigrant and far-right movements shows the degree to which racist ideas have a sea to swim in. Right here, right now, with their Nazi uniforms and flags, the NSM will appear laughable to many people. Despite this, it is worthwhile to look into them, their ideas, and their strategy. What becomes clear after watching videos online and sifting through NSM texts and literature is that the NSM has become very media savvy after so much time in the spotlight. Getting time in the media is perhaps one of the few things that the NSM does well, since the whole website designing, video making, and general writing thing ain't going too well for them. The media allows the NSM to refer to themselves as white nationalists and national socialists versus the more inflammatory Nazis or supremacists. In fact, the NSM calls themselves a civil rights organization. All of this while parading through the streets with stickers saying Spix and screaming Sieg Heil and carrying Nazi flags. The media, of course, does not call out the NSM on this and takes their claims at face value, even though it is clear to anyone who studies the NSM that they are a through and through racist organization. So, while the whole Nazi dress-up thing gets them a lot of press, at the same time, in the press they hide and dodge everything that they actually believe. Their strategy in doing these little rallies seems to simply be an attempt to get their name in the media, in hopes that people will flock to them and their movement will grow. In coming to Phoenix, the NSM hoped to make links with the anti-immigrant movement, and to build their influence outside of the skinhead and white power subculture, an effort that failed horribly on their part, as evidenced by low turnout for the general far-right anti-immigrant and militia movement. Image problems aside, a quick reading of the NSM position on their website tells a different story than the simple America lovers that NSM would like to portray themselves as. While the NSM claims that they are only against illegal immigration, they state clearly in their 25 points of American National Socialism that they are against any non-white migration to the United States. After gaining power, they propose that all non-white people and Jews are deported back to their original countries of origin, peacefully or by force. Since the NSM couldn't get more than 40 people to show up at their rally, even though they bust people in from out of the state, I have serious doubts that they possess the organizational skills required to carry out such an operation. As for the pro-white working class rhetoric the NSM pumps out, they are clear enemies of all working people, black, white, brown, and everything else. According to our would-be Führers, they want to do away with all Marxist trade unions. By that I suppose they mean the ones that exist now, and force workers to belong to the National Socialist ones, i.e., unions run by the state. While NSM promotes a beefed-up welfare state, money for schools and healthcare, not for Jews, they're not exactly enemies of capitalism. So breathe easy, bigwigs and fat cats. In fact, despite all their attacks on communists, the NSM is a bigger fan of nationalization of major corporations than any of the Obamaites and probably most Trustafarian college Trotskyite grad students you'll ever meet. That's right, in the state capitalist future of the NSM, you'll work for a state-run corporation, belong to a state-run union, and live under the unconditional authority of a political central parliament over an entire nation and its organizations. Feel like a wage slave now? You ain't seen nothing yet. Let's go over this again, shall we? Under American National Socialism, you're still a wage slave, you still pay rent and mortgage, you will pay for things that you and other workers create at work, you will still live in a class society of property owners and wage workers, only now many of those property owners are a part of the government. You don't work for private businesses, you work for state-run corporations. You can't participate in unions except ones that are run by the state. Be careful what you say and write as well, or the all-powerful NSM cadre just might pay you a visit. Despite the NSM's standard line that they simply want to pressure politicians in the U.S. to put America first and end illegal immigration, the NSM's positions are very clear. They want a more bureaucratic and totalitarian version of the modern capitalist system. Think China, but more totally racist. Furthermore, their movement offers nothing for working people. Why drive across 2 states for a shitty rally with 30 people who will probably be locked up for selling meth next week, when multiracial groups of workers are taking action all the time to actually better their conditions? For instance, the workers at Republic Windows and Glass Factory who occupied it together and won back their wages and benefits. I'd rather have ferrets dipped in tapatio fight in my pants while I stand in line at the DMV than live in the America that the National Socialist Movement wants. But apparently a small number of people disagree with me. Therein lies the conflict. If you want beef, then bring the ruckus. Phoenix ain't nothing to fuck with. November 7th, 2009, the anarchists of Arizona, made up of groups from Phoenix, Flagstaff, and elsewhere, numbered between 150 to 200. Joining the anarchists were libertarians from various groups, as well as veterans, leftists, queer folks, Chicano activists. Another large contingent was Native youth, especially from the OADAM Solidarity Across Borders Collective, which was out in force, as well as young people from various reservations across Arizona, carrying huge banners that read, "This is anti-fascism, no states, no borders," and "No foreclosures, no deportations, round up Nazis, not immigrants." Along with black flags, anarchists were clearly the largest group in vocal opposition. Most of the crowd appeared in black bloc, with their faces covered in masks. At this standoff, anarchists did several things right. They stayed ahead of the Nazis and were able to physically attack them with rocks and paint bombs, and did not allow the police to arrest anyone. Instead of being physically directly across from the Nazis, the anarchists tried to stay ahead of them in order to try to get to the street and confront them head on. When the NSM group came to where the anarchists were, police quickly moved them onto the sidewalk, keeping the two sides apart and out of the street. The Nazis marched to their rally site from their parking space a couple of blocks away. Hardly anyone was on the street at this point, other than police, Nazis, and anarchists. Anarchists made several attempts to get into the street and go at the Nazis, but mounted police did their damnedest to make sure that they didn't. After the Nazis had gotten to their rally point, police at first attempted to separate non-Nazis from their rally, which was simply held on the grass of the state capitol, not on the steps like rallies in other states. This lasted for about 5 minutes before people as a group said fuck that and rushed the space. At this point, police formed a line between anarchists and the Nazis. While brave souls threw rocks and paint bombs, anarchists were able to use large banners to create a barrier between the prying eyes of police and the large stones that littered the Phoenix ground. And soon these rocks were flying through the air. The NSM quickly responded by getting their SHIELD team up in front in an effort to deflect any projectiles from the leadership cadre. Despite the police presence of about 100, comrades doing surveillance away from the rally also saw undercover SWAT vehicles, filled with highly armed police who were equipped to stomp anyone into the ground if a riot erupted. Even if we could have rolled on the Nazis, we would probably have suffered more from the state in the ensuing clash. The greatest irony of the NSM rally was there was no one at the Capitol. They spoke to no one outside of those who heard their message through the media. The anarchists who surrounded them were so loud that the speakers could barely even be heard. The speakers on the mic also spent so much time calling the counter-protesters faggots and Jews that they didn't really have any time to address anything else. The police quickly had enough, and an hour and a half before they were supposed to leave, the police made them shut down and then walked them back to their cars. Along the way, anarchists again tried to get into the streets and made several attempts to create barricades, but quick police response botched those attempts and led to several near arrests as anarchists grabbed their friends out of the hands of cops. The Nazis, over half of whom were from out of state, lots of Texas plates, got back in their cars and headed out. As we walked back to our cars, someone pulled up and screamed, "The Nazis just got into a car accident and they're outside a McDonald's." We rushed to the scene to find a speaker of the NSM with a broken leg. Stephen Lemons of the New York Times wrote, "The only casualty for the NSMers came as a result of their own error. When they caused an accident on 7th Avenue and Van Buren in one of the rental cars they left in after the demo, an unidentified Nazi was rushed away in an ambulance for his injured leg. Phoenix Police Sergeant Brian Murray confirmed at the scene that the accident was the fault of the Nazis, whose small white car collided with a large red truck. None of the Nazis were taken into custody, though the truck's driver was arrested for not having ID and proof of insurance. Murray said the arrested driver would be ticketed and released as long as he had no outstanding warrants. The driver of the NSM car was ticketed as well, but according to NSM spokesman Charles Wilson, the Nazi wheelman refused to sign the citation. Wilson later blamed the accident on the police, saying the cops were supposed to have kept the street clear for the Nazis' exit. Probably the best thing for the whole day was when workers at the store next to the accident came out and laughed at the Nazis as they drove away surrounded by police. while people in cars passed laughing their asses off. The Nazis did some salutes to the anarchists laughing across the street, and people in cars were heard to be screaming, "Karma's a bitch, ha 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 ha." Stay strapped. Anarchists carried at this event, meaning anarchists had guns, out in the open, and it was legal. That's right, it's not just Nazis and anti-immigrant types who are packing now at protests, it's our side too. In Arizona, it's legal to openly carry firearms as long as your weapon is legal and yours. This is the first time I have seen anarchists at a demonstration carry firearms with them, and I have to say that the experience was very empowering. Those in states with similar laws should consider getting firearms and doing the same if possible. This is not me fetishizing armed struggle or guns. The way forward is collective action by working people in their workplaces, communities, and in the street. But if we are going to go up against people like the NSM, we should be prepared to defend ourselves, especially if we can avoid legal risks while openly carrying weapons. It should be noted that members of the NSM have been seen carrying weapons while counter-protesting pro-immigration marches. People like J.T. Reddy have also been known to follow Mexicano people in the local area, often well-armed, hoping to deport them. As a friend told me that was packing at the protest, I want to show them that we are not an unarmed movement. Next time. Confronting the NSM gave anarchists in Phoenix and the wider area a lot of attention, and also a chance to come together and confront some enemies. We had the chance to get in the street and see what we were made of. We made plans, evaded and pushed back police, threw rocks, armed ourselves, and stood our ground. We need only to take this experience and apply it to the terrain of everyday life. As Stephen Lemons wrote, "Whatever bad rep anarchists had before Saturday, deserved or undeserved, has now been absolved." Any political capital the NSM hoped to have gained from the event of the 7th obviously slid from their fingers. They failed to attract anyone from the surrounding area outside party members, nor white people from the anti-immigration movement. The media was very clear in all their reports that protesters against the NSM outnumbered the NSM greatly. They failed to bring out even 50 people, much less the 200 they were counting on. By using media to get the NSM's name out into the world, their public loss to anarchists instead gave the radicals a platform. The question is, what are we going to do with it? Clearly we have shifted the discourse away from liberal dialogue that is focused on the issues being simply about hate. Sure, the NSM is hateful, but they are a political group that seeks to overthrow the US system and replace it with one that is much more totalitarian, bureaucratic, and violent. In NSM's America, the millions who demonstrated and took over the streets on May Day 2006 against anti-immigrant legislation would have been deported. The Workers' Republic of Windows and Glass would have been labeled communists and killed. The student workers who in 2009 in California occupied their schools against budget cuts and fee hikes would have been called traitors to the state and shot. We must oppose the NSM not only because they are racist, but because politically they offer a more monstrous version of capitalism than what we have today. Furthermore, targeting the NSM is a tactic against Sheriff Joe and against the wider system that attacks working-class migrants. We can combat white supremacy that seeks to divide the working class in this country, which stops working people from coming together against their class enemies. Furthermore, the NSM is a weak enemy and fighting them is good practice. Let us sharpen our knives, load our guns, and train now as we look for bigger and better foes. Next time around, anarchists will have to be on the defensive much more. The police were slow to respond and make arrests, and anarchists could have gotten away with a lot more attacks and rock throwing than they engaged in. As the struggle against speed cameras, Sheriff Joe, freeway expansion, and on the horizon a huge strike at various Arizona grocery store chains, the possibilities of intervention for anarchists in Arizona remain. We must also stay on our guard against the NSM, unless of course they crash their cars on the way back to Texas. Now that would be something to salute.